Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Off Track. We've been away for a while, but we weren't gone. In fact, in the time that we've been away, I've had the opportunity to meet and chat with someone who's intelligent and outspoken, one of the people that falls under the India's only bracket. And here's the best part, she's in Formula One. If you hadn't guessed already, I spoke to Niharika Ghorpade, India's only active full time F1 journalist. In fact, as you listen to this episode, she's probably boarding her flight to Shanghai for the upcoming Chinese Grand Prix. So, without further ado, tune into the episode to know her story, what she thinks about Indian motorsport, and what keeps her loving what she does. Cool. Let's start with an introduction about you and what you do and why are you here in the IRL and F4.
So I'm Niharika Ghorpade. I am a Formula One journalist and I'm here at the Indian Racing League and the FI Indian F4 Championship to present for the broadcast. And yeah, that's it.
How's your experience been so far? I know we're just 1.5 races in, but...
Well, my experience with the Indian Racing League also dates back to when it started, and my younger sibling was a part of it.
Yeah.
IRL is always one of those series that probably brings the whole motorsport fraternity together. I have known these drivers, and yeah, my experience so far, I mean, I've seen people like Bianca Bustamante go where she is now. She's with us in the F1 paddock. And then there's Chloe Chong, who I met at F1 Academy, and now I see her here. Yeah, there's Alistair Young, whose father Alex was ex-F1, and then we've seen Alex since my first season in the sport. I've seen Alex with Fox Sports, and yeah, there were a lot of familiar faces and a lot of good exchange of talent across the line or across the globe that we have here. Some of the drivers I know by now, like Fabian and the others. So yeah, coming here, it's more like a fraternity, more or less. So it's like reuniting with the fraternity, and presenting obviously is the first time I'm doing it for a racing series in India, and it's my first time working with that kind of production and the whole shenanigans involved with it. So yeah, I'm enjoying it for now.
You did mention that you've seen these drivers since they were young. I know that some
Yeah.
of them raced with your brother.
Yes.
And it obviously goes to tell that you've been around for a while now. Not that I'm making you
Yeah.
feel old,
Yeah.
but just to allude to the kind of experience that you come with, right? What has your background been like? When did you fall in love with motorsport and you wanted to be here and you thought you could make a career here?
So with motorsport, I think it started with go-karting. We had a go-kart track in Kolhapur in my city, and it started with my mother, my father, my brother, me. It was our weekend thing. It was obviously rental karts, and then it became more serious later when it became competitive, when we realized we were really passionate about it. And both Parth and I used to kart.
You did?
Yeah. Without a racing background, I don't think my father would have literally let me even veer next to a racing career, because I think he's a businessman and I could have always joined him in. So there were other careers probably he would have taken more seriously and would have been like, don't waste my money on this.
Yeah.
Or especially on a degree with journalism and things like that. But yeah, when I think the reason he took me seriously back then when I was 19 or 21, and when I said like I want to be a motorsport journalist, is because he knew where it was coming from, and he knew how naturally I fit into it. Or at that particular age, you normally have your family kind of questioning your
Yes.
choices. And yeah, for me it all started with the karting, when karting was fun. Then it became a motorsport household for me when my younger brother went through the ranks of junior formula, and then he was with Ferrari Driver Academy for the F3 test. He was in the French F4, the same F4 we have now, an Indian F4. He was in the French version of it. He raced Pierre Gasly, Sébastien Ogier, Maximilian Günther. There were really quite a few there who you've now seen either in F2 or F1. So, I mean, he raced at that level, and then he was also in the Formula Renault Alps, the Alps series, Renault Alps series, which was also with French. And that was like, in the junior formulas, I saw that in my household. I knew the step by step from then to F1. And back then, I started with interning at the age of 21-ish with motorsport, with the automotive magazine. But because I belonged to this background, I think Aditya, Arman, who are today founders of this IRL, were back then racing. They were 20 and 21. So my first interviews are like, call a friend. Because I knew all of them. Even if it was Naren, Karun, we had grown up through the categories with them. And karting has always been a stepping stone for everything. And how are you going to understand, how are you going to know what to write about racing if you don't have that racing background, if you don't know what an apex is, what a cornering entry or exit is, how are you going to know that? And that's something so ingrained at us. When we started karting, we were like, I was 10, my brother was 5. When he started competitive karting, he was 8. I didn't do competitive karting beyond 4 strokes, but I did dabble into 2 strokes, and we always had a kart in the house, so all you were doing is pounding laps around a circuit. And that was something I was used to. Yeah. And yeah, by the age of 16, I don't think the karting bits were there with me anymore because I was in boarding school and I was studying in Australia. But I did try some Aussie kart circuits. I did try almost diverting my student funds or college funds to go-karts, and that's when
That's the way
that's when I think the call from home came saying, you are not going to be able to do that. Karting's expensive in Australia. So there's that. And then obviously then when I came back to India, I think a professor back in the university there had suggested me, you're so passionate about this subject that whenever you have to do your journalism assignments, they end up being something motorsport related. You're either covering a local circuit there or interviewing some young karter or something of that sort. Yeah, and he said, have you ever thought of combining your passion with what you really qualified for now that you have a degree? And that's when I started working with car magazines. And back then, fashion magazines, there were a lot of options to do journalism with. And I had done the newspapers, but as an intern, I think by the time I graduated, because I completed a bit of my graduation in Australia and a bit in India, there was like 4 years of it, so 8 semesters. Yeah. And I had already completed a lot of internships as a civic reporter or whatever. So I'd already done that, and I knew that that is not my thing. So then it was these car magazines, let me try this. And then the motorsports section would naturally fall onto me, because that's something I could close my eyes and write on. And then from 2010 to say today, we're in 2013, it's been a proper profession, and I became the first full-fledged only motorsport journalist in this country. Then Dinakaran, Vaishali Dinakaran, you've heard more names, they came much later. More during the Indian Grand Prix time, I think. And yeah, by then I had become a name that was like within this fraternity, doing stuff for this fraternity. So yeah, now, and then Formula One wasn't very far away. Because I remember watching my first race in Australia. I'd saved up my student money. It's 2006 Albert. And the first Aussie Grand Prix I watched, and back then I was like, this is what I would wish to do. And by the time I watched the 2013 Indian Grand Prix, which is the last Grand Prix, I think my editors and all were working there, but my younger brother was in the support race for the Indian Grand Prix, so I was in the support paddock.
And was it the MRF?
Yeah, the Formula MRF. So he was with there. And one of the ex-F1 driver's siblings was his teammate, which is Arthur Pick, and his brother Charles Pick was with Caterham.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so the Pick brothers. Back then that grid actually had a lot of good people. It had Josh Hill too, Damon's son. And that time we had the JK series, Formula MRF. So a lot of these youngsters who I see now in international motorsport, they have somewhere traversed through the subcontinent. Yeah. And I mean, that last Indian Grand Prix was like, okay, now I've seen the paddock. Now this is where I want to thrive. And 2 years after that, I landed my first F1 gig, and now the rest is history. I completed my 9th season of Formula One.
Can you believe it?
Yeah. And time's just flown. That's just how F1 is. And I completed my 9th season in the sport. And I start my 10th next year. Yeah.
That's incredible. There are so many questions that I can ask about your whole journey, because there are kids today that don't know how to identify that passion, and where do you amalgamate the two, your passion and what you're qualified for?
So I loved writing. So I did a degree in it. I loved writing. So journalism was it. I loved talking, and I loved reading the news. And I used to be a newsreader in my school assembly. I remember that way back in the day. And I loved reading the news. And one day I knew that maybe this news anchoring and maybe this is for me. TV, I didn't really have the confidence for it.
Yeah.
But writing, I knew that could just flow through me effortlessly.
Nail it. Yeah.
And this was a subject I could just write and write and write on and still not be bored with. So I think that came with a sense of confidence. But from day one, I think you need to know that you're unique in your own way. Each one comes with something very unique to themselves. And it's very easy to go in for cliches. Like India back then, a BBA was a thing.
Yes.
But bachelors in mass comm, there were like 5 universities in India that offered even a bachelor's in it. It was a master's thing. Whereas I'm lucky I did it at my bachelor's and I didn't go on to waste more money doing a master's. Because by the time I was 21, I was ready for the job.
Yeah.
And that means had I gone through that procession-ish format and system, I would have probably ended up in F1 in my 30s instead of my 20s. And when I walked into that paddock, I was like a 26-year-old, and Verstappen and the others must have been 17-year-olds or whatever. But it is about, I don't know if I was too young or too old, but I was there for my profession at the right time. But a lot of it came due to the choices I made.
Yeah.
You have to take those right choices. Friends of mine were doing engineering, law, medicine, the standard trio that you see everywhere. Everyone wanted to do an MBA and I wanted to do more work. So while my friends had already gone into their masters, I wanted to still work. I wanted to do work. I was done with studying because I felt I was a voracious reader. I could have clearing exams in those particular subjects, yes, but when you're a reader, you tend to read and remember and you grasp knowledge. And knowledge was everything in the field I was walking into. And I knew, like, somewhere through the course of my degree, maybe I knew I was just cut out for this line a bit too well. And yeah, I mean, when you have good communication skills, you have a good command over the language, and confidence is something that will build. But I think youngsters need to know that the choices have to come through what they're passionate about. Do what you love and love what you do. And that is what I wanted. And today that's the only thing that can keep me happy all year round. It's like, that's one thing that keeps me alive, which is, or that can bring me alive rather. It is that I'm doing what I love. I'm in a field that I love. And F1 feels home. Because it has been home for me.
Yeah.
It's from my veranda to whatever, to every racetrack. There were racetracks I'd heard of because Parth, my younger one, had raced on them. There were drivers I'd heard of because they'd raced with him. We've seen it through the ranks. We've been a motorsport household. So we've known how it works. We've known the business of it, which is how the managers work, how the deals work, the deals with to get a drive with the team to start with. And yeah, I mean, when I was there, I mean, and I've also been very close with Force India back then, because Parth almost got selected to become Force India driver. So yeah, I mean, I've seen that team. Then when I entered F1, there was Monisha Kaltenborn. Sauber. She was F1's first female team boss, but she was Indian. She was from Dehradun. Then we had Vijay Mallya was there. There were a lot more people in Force India related to who we knew. And yeah, I mean, back then I think in the Indian Grand Prix was also added presence or a good representation of us in the sport. Today we might not have that, but I think we're better off because we have a lot happening in this country right now.
This is a nice segue. Now I just want to kind of throw it back because you have lived and in a way not lived that entire life cycle of a racing driver.
Yeah.
Because you started out as a karting driver and then you saw your brother progress through, and I'm sure that every step of the way you've been there for him, right? So you've lived the ups and the downs and the stagnant bits.
Yeah.
Would you say that things have changed from the way they were before to now?
Okay, so one, it's a very different story when it comes to a motorsport household. I remember my father saying, I can't afford 2 children in F1. I mean, I can't afford 2 children in this sport. And the quicker one gets it. So it was like, I think there was an understanding, okay, you race your way into it and I'm going to write and talk my way into it. It's going to work that way. I set out on the same path. somewhere our paths converged, and today it just happens to be that I'm still in it. When it comes to the highs and lows, I think motorsport is a sport where you really need family unity. It's ripped people's households, and when you get burned, you get burned. It's not for everyone, and you'll see everyone from a top F1 driver to, one's even going up that ladder saying that you need a support system. And you're going to see ups and downs, highs and lows. Sometimes driver siblings have abandonment issues because their parents' life has been centered around that one sibling of theirs that is doing this career. And in my case, I guess the driver sibling reached F1, but I would say, like, at one point I think I feared that. I was just lucky I had a grandparent as a support system. So my grandparent really was hands-on involved right since I was born, because I was the first girl born in the family. So I was the only granddaughter. So my grandmother played a part of compensating that maybe. But yeah, there would be a time when you'd feel you need your parents, through your teens, your early tweens, before you've started working. You need that support system. And at that particular time, I guess you can say that it was all a learning process. It was all up and down. It matures you a bit too early. And I was extremely very independent, so that solved my parents' problem, because I'd lived in boarding school. I had been outside Kolhapur city. I mean, I'm born in Kolhapur, but out of 35 years of my life, 22 years I've never lived there. So I've always been out. And that was there. There was a sense of independence. I used to live in Pune for a very long time, and that's where the desk jobs used to happen. But yeah, I mean, once you go to F1, I think the whole game changes. It's a whole different ball game. And what was the next question?
No, I was just saying, do you think the process of becoming a Formula One driver, WEC driver, any top tier motorsport driver has changed significantly for somebody coming from India?
Now, yes. Now you see a lot more of them in Europe. See, with Parth, what we saw with my younger brother and my father was, he was the first Indian to get his karting license at 10 because he qualified for the World Cup finals. He was the first one who got his international karting license at 10. The CIK. And I remember that was in Malaysia, I think. Then we were karting in Asia, in Malaysia, from a very, very young age, and he was doing everything very young. Yes. The sponsorship bit, I don't know if it's still really good. I don't know, because I'm hearing stories very similar from what we have experienced. So sponsorship-wise, it's still the same story. But otherwise, I'd say, is there more infrastructure? The tracks may be lesser. The tracks are still the same. You still just have Coimbatore, Chennai, and Delhi. And what you need is more level 2 grade circuits all over the country. And I'm hearing of a lot of them get built, but I don't know by what date we'll have them. Karting has improved. The karting infrastructure has definitely improved. And the karting quality and competition has improved. But we already started seeing that change when I think Parth was in seniors. And a lot has changed. I'd say people are more aware of motorsport today. They weren't back then. And that's the reason why Indian Grand Prix was slapped with the entertainment tax to start with. Motorsport was recognized as entertainment. Say when my sibling had to give his CBSE or 12th and 10th boards, they had to take permission. By then, I think one of the ministers back then got it recognized. And that's why then this also got counted as an international level sport. So you got a certain credit or whatever in your exams, in your academics, especially I think the 10th grade or 12th grade. So that took time to happen. A lot has changed. I'd say there's more awareness, there's more interest. You see a more, right up even in Delhi, you see a lot of it. There are a lot of girls in the sport, which wasn't there back then. I mean, a female in karting, I think mentally, even if you wanted to race your way to Formula One, I don't think I could have even dreamt of it, because I couldn't see how it was going to happen. There had nobody to show you the path. It was a very boys' game, and now you see women almost everywhere. Back then, I think the number of women working in motorsport would be about 10 or 15 of us. Like, I've known Kushbu, who's always been with JK. I've known Hetal. And these are the old names that I know.
Those are the only names even I know.
And this is right since I started as an intern. These are the only two I knew. I knew a biker who was a writer, Firdaus. I don't know if she's still there. She then became automotive PR. Now even in the automotive industry, you see so many women. Back then, there was just 4 of us who were females working with car magazines. Kriplani was one, Renuka. There was Shreen Ban, there was me, and then Dina Karan came in later. So that's just 4 in the whole country. And yeah, Firdaus used to be there, 5. But we're a country of 1.8 billion people. Those numbers kind of sound odd at times. And back then, I say motorsport journalism, that field didn't even exist. I just happened to be an expert and then just got hired just for that. Okay, she just does this. So let's hire her for that. Let's have somebody dedicated, and she's been doing only this. So that's how the market got created, because you're the first. When it came to my brother, we had to make the first similarly. When it came to karting in Europe, when it came to going up to French F4, he was also in the FI Driver Academy. There were a lot of other things that we had to do on our own. Now that path has been paved by Parth, so there are other drivers who can take that up. There's certain things in Indian motorsport where we've already paved that path as a family also. When it comes to managers, for instance, Gasly's current manager is Parth's first engineer. So that's how it is. There was even an F1 driver called Rio Haryanto. Rio and his brother Cleo actually karted in Kolhapur, of all places. So we've seen them really small. His manager Piazani said Newell. So there are a lot of these people who roam in the F1 paddock today who have literally we've known. And a lot of the names you'll hear from now and then, like for Kush, the path is paved, I'll say, for someone like Kush. And from Kush downwards, or after him, whoever goes up that ladder, a lot of people have already done that now. Like with Arjun, even with Arjun, everything was a little bit of a first. And I mean, someone somewhere had to chalk that path.
Correct.
That I think we've seen that happen. How motorsport will be henceforth now, you have the Indian F4, which has given you some legitimacy. Also, there's Akbar Ibrahim, who's on the karting commission, and the right one to do it. Because he gave a lot into karting. When I was small, his karting camps were the thing. Like, and that's how it's been. And so now you have, I'm sure there are many more karting camps. I think all these current drivers, Parth and his compatriots, take karting camps now. So karting camps are no more the way Akku Uncle would have done them many years ago. And yes, I mean, motorsport in India has come a long way, but it's still very, the numbers are still very small. And it's still stuck to a Chennai or a Coimbatore or a Bangalore. You hardly see a lot of it happening in the West, which is in Maharashtra, you hardly see. And we've had a lot of racing crowd there. I think, but racing ends there. I think it's furthest it goes is like Gujarat, that to Baroda, Ahmedabad maybe. Anywhere apart from that, where do you see motorsport happening?
You don't.
Karting, like a quality level karting. Where are those kart tracks? Where are those level 2 circuits? And I think north is as much to rallying as you come down south in the peninsula, and it's to racing. So I think it will grow. This series, IRL, Indian F4, it's a good start. And it has to get better probably from there.
And it will. These things take time, right? I'm
sure I mean, look at the talent we've had. Like Bianca's gone there. We've had W Series racers. John and Oliver. John has done driver coaching, and John Lancaster is the name to reckon with. There's Neil Jani this weekend. That's the name to reckon with. So you don't have average talent in the Indian Racing League this year. It's quite quality talent, and even in Indian F4, I mean, there's Cooper Webster. There's Alex Sauer, the Vietnamese, who's really taken me by surprise. And you have a lot of NRI talent coming in, like the Bora brothers and all of them. So definitely, if Indian F4 exists, depending on how it will be run and where it goes from series to year, if it becomes a good event, you will see a lot of foreign talent come in, and at the same time, you'll have the Indian talent being groomed well. And that makes a lot of difference. A regional F3 or a regional F4. These are they're cheaper series for you to kind of get used to single seaters and then progress to a more better series in the single seater path. So whichever drivers are on a single seater path, this kind of a series makes a huge difference. A series like this being on the calendar. So yes, it does make a difference for India, because you can't just have FE and MotoGP
Yeah,
and then
not-
you had F1,
Yeah.
and then your grassroots stuck
Gone.
in
Yeah.
limbo.
Correct.
So yeah, you can see that a bit.
You hit
shaping
the
up.
nail on the head there.
Yeah.
Now, this is a bit of a trick question, and I don't want to sound like a complete idiot asking this, but if you had to sort of copy paste Parth's career or even your career, because
Yeah.
now you're into broadcasting
Yeah.
and this would be a broadcasting debut.
Yeah.
If we had opportunities like the Indian F4 or the IRL, do you think you would have reached F1 sooner, or you would have been at a higher position now? Or do you think,
If there were so many on the karting side, if there were so many women in this sport,
yeah,
I would have not thought of writing my way to the sport. I would have raced my way to it. If when it comes to my brother, if Indian F4 existed way back then, and we had JK Tire series in Formula MRF,
Yes,
but they're
we
nowhere
did.
close to this.
Yeah.
And if we had that back then, I think Parth would have been in F1 for that matter. But I think one thing that people forget is when it comes to F3 and F2 itself, back then we had Renault World Series.
Correct.
We had
Yeah.
the FIA F3.
Yeah.
These two, like World Series was closest to F1, like F1.5
Yeah, yeah.
when it came to the level. And
that's the GP2 renamed GP2, right?
no. Renault World Series was Renault had a lot of series. It had Renault Alps, Renault NEC, Renault 2.0. They had the Euro Cup,
okay, that's like
and then they had the Renault World Series. So
on
World
top of
Series is where Carlos or even I think Seb came from there. But that series was the most. It prepared a driver the best compared to even the current F3, F2.
Oh wow. Okay.
What happened later? Then the FIA F3 ran outside the limelight, and you had GP3 and GP2.
Correct.
The GP3 and FIA F3 are combined now into one F3,
Right.
and then GP2 has been rebadged as the F2. So you have the F3, F2, F1, and then obviously you have F3 regionals. You have F3 Asia, which we didn't have back then.
Yeah.
So there were these other series that we didn't have, like Parth did F3 Italy, if I'm not wrong. You didn't have you had American F3, you had Italian F3 and stuff like that, but you didn't have a Asian F3. So that you have now. Instead, we had Formula BMW Asia and Formula BMW. Which I think Daniel Ricciardo was also part of. We had the Formula Abarth that got changed to Formula Pilota, which Parth went and did in the same team, Eurasia Motorsport. So yeah, I mean you've had, now it's slightly changed, but the one part that people don't understand with F1 is the series, the moment you get next to F3 or F2, the amounts like 6 million, 7 million, 4 million, 5 million. I mean, it starts at that. Back then, 2 million was the maximum, but that was for some midfield team, tops. But where are you going to get that from? Self-fundedly, how far can you go? You need sponsors. Who's going to get you that?
Yeah.
Who's going to get you? You need that financial funding. You need an ASN funding you.
Yeah.
And I don't know to what extent the ASNs here, or the local FMSCI for that matter, has had its own money to put on a driver, if you look at it that way. So I think that's where, say, a Pierre Gasly and Parth both were compatriots.
Yeah.
Say, Pierre, he was backed by FFSA right from day one.
Correct.
Parth never had that backing from anywhere. The only backing he had was us. So you need that backing. That makes a lot of difference. And I think going along the path of Formula One, it comes with its ups and downs. You can feel you're right at the door and not yet be there. And don't forget, I was in F1 already and I was there to help my younger sibling out. So at the maximum, I could give him a driver management or something like that. We couldn't bring the price down. We couldn't reduce the funds.
Yeah.
So when it comes to that, that has to change. So you can have numerous series here and a whole playground ready of drivers to throw into Formula One. But how many are going to go? Does it have to be that rich millionaire kid or rich Indian or rich Asians? Do you want to fit that stereotype? Or do you really want to have a bit of the working class and middle class represented there?
Right.
At least the middle class. Indian middle class, I think, has enough to, say, fund you till about a F4. But after F4, you need those sponsors.
Correct.
You can't have millionaire proteges going there all the time and wasting all their money and saying F1's not for India.
Very
And that is the narrative that has been created by
Everyone.
by a lot of people, yes.
Yeah.
So, and it's not like it can't be done. You see F1 growing so much. You see the kind of money being thrown in F1.
Correct.
Today, anybody would drive. That same marketing model can start working for drivers right from the junior series. But there has to be an interest generated in it. And I think that's a part that needs more ironing out. How many motorsport PR agencies do we have? How many motorsport talent agencies do we have? Do we have the managements for them? Motorsport driver management. Back then, things had started sprouting during the Indian Grand Prix and things like that. But then later, I think it went down a bit.
A little bit, yeah.
And now, I don't know if it's coming up again. But you need that infrastructure in place. You need marketing agencies doing only motorsport. You need social media companies doing only motorsport content. And how are you going to make only motorsport a field? might have done it my way.
Yeah, you did.
And I stuck to my guns without taking no for an answer at all. Right. And it worked.
Yeah.
But what about the others? How many really, what do you say? How many are not ready to accept a no for an answer and yet relentlessly, persist? So how many are ready to do that? Because I have seen people, even counterparts of mine, there were quite a few who wanted to do what I did. But how many of them are ready? A lot of them, at some point, acceptance happens. There's a bit of acceptance. And that acceptance is around, okay, I can't do it anymore. And that comes with a field like mine. So you can well imagine with a driver field.
Yeah.
I think when it came to us, we decided it won't be single-seaters. It'll go the other path.
Yeah.
And it's not like he doesn't race, he's good enough to drive another
Not
series.
at all.
Yeah. So, I mean, our family, the acceptance came in after a brutal awakening that financially this is the furthest we could go. That was the acceptance we had to make there. But in my case, the acceptance, I guess I'm in a very different field altogether.
Correct.
And given the sport and how it's gone, the diversity path, they want more diversity, they want more women. So I cut in right through. It wasn't there back then when I started, but now I'm getting what it takes to be recognized. It's helped me in a way. And maybe if I had to start now, yes, I would be in F1 in 2 years of doing what I did. Took 10 years to do probably. Because now you have YouTube, you have TikTok, everything. Yeah. The whole social media, the social media scenario has changed.
Yeah.
It's just burst everywhere. So, yes, if I had the choice not to work under nasty editors who didn't want women in the workplace and do a YouTube channel instead, hell yes, I would have gone in for that. But nobody even knew YouTube could generate an income back then.
True.
And we are talking about 2010, 2009.
Yeah.
So how are you going to do that? So yeah, times have changed.
I think that's the best answer I've heard to that question. And it's the honest truth.
Yeah, it's the honest truth.
And I like the fact that you brought in this whole play of marketability, right? And this is a question that I've been debating with myself for quite a bit. In today's current generation, take any driver across any field, right?
Yeah.
How much of it is wherever this driver is, let's say the topmost, any motorsport in the topmost level, how much of it is because they were able to market themselves really well, and how much of it is because of
their talent?
Talented?
So, see, I've seen raw talent when it came to my sibling. I've seen a bit of talent, but a lot of marketing.
Yeah.
Then I've seen just marketing and PR-worthy drivers through my career, where the talent just doesn't back it up. And those drivers haven't made it to F1 as a result of it. They fizzle out outside the door of F1 maybe. But it has to be a complete package. The marketing, grooming, it can come along. But talent is something you can't substitute. That's what carries you, and that's what you have to be there for. And that's what it matters. I mean, the marketable drivers are only going to sponge off a lot of sponsorship and not be able to deliver performances like the way they need it to. And what F1 needs is not just Indian drivers, it needs Indian champions. If you had to see Parth's resume, it was title, or at least top 5 finishes in Europe. 1 to 5, finishing 1 to 5 in a championship there. Even at the Asian level, it was a title complete. So it has to be that number one scenario. It has to be the winning mindset. And I think that goes in every career too. I think a lot of people don't adopt that mindset. Nowadays, you have a lot of mindset coaching happening online, and there are a lot of tools available to enlighten yourself with, and flip that, that psyche inside of being able to persist, be relentless, not take a no for an answer in the job. Because I think if you look at my job, at least say gender-wise, my brother fit into what he did. But if you look at my job as a female, the amount of no's you must have had to take. Half your peers didn't know what you were doing. Forget the industry and the job. Friends thought I did a hobby. I didn't even have a career. When I was getting paid for as a career, and it wasn't a hobby. But today when it's got big, now I see those same friends maybe watch a bit of Drive to Survive and say, okay, what about this driver and that driver? And oh, my husband told me this one's like this and that one's like that. And they'll check with them, but it's still a little bit, their knowledge of this sport is by the male, through the male in their family, which is sad. It should have been like, no, I am interested in it. So that still has to happen. It's happening more with Gen Z, or say your age group. In my age group, it's there scantily in places. A lot of people in school, in my school, I was a boarding school, so we were a lot about sport. So I think back then there were quite a few who were into F1, and that used to be a little F1 coterie. So we knew each other, we bonded on that subject, that or football. And I mean, people still recognize it from chatting F1 then to where it came to now, where it became a thing for me, and where I actually have a job. This is a really long journey, but it didn't come with its set of no's. It was about persisting through those no's, and that takes a different mindset to adopt. Like, no, I know me, I know my capability, I was made for this. And the one thing I think, I don't know, I used to always, since I was an 8-year-old child, walk up to my father and say ridiculous things like one day I'll be in Formula 1 kind of nonsense. So back then my father used to be, that's just my talkative 8-year-old. Because for me, I started watching Formula 1 as a toddler. So it was a very different ordeal altogether. It was that one thing you did with dad on Sundays because that was the only time you got to spend with him. So whether it was sitting with your doll tea party and watching F1 or whatever it was, but Sunday was race day. And Sundays was the time my father would be free to spend time with me. So it started with me and F1, and where I've reached, it started at that young age. And I think it was somewhere when I was, through my career, I must have been in my early 20s, and my dad said, these motorsport jobs are not paying you. Are you sure you want to do this? Is there even a career like this? And I was like, Dad, I'm going to be in F1, relax. He's like, if you think you're going to be in F1, you're dreaming. I mean, be realistic. But even those wake-up calls did not really, what do you say, kind of veer me off my path or detour me to another route. At sometimes, yes, I've questioned myself, like, am I doing this? I mean, is it worth it? But yes, it is. 9 seasons down the line, of course it's worth it. It's the best job in the world. I love doing what I do. And yeah, one day I said I would be in F1, and I am in F1. So I lived at least up to that. And the other part is like thriving in it also. It's not just doing it. It's also, like some people would say, like, F1's one of those fields. You have to survive, but then you also have to thrive. But if you don't survive the drill and grill, you're not going to thrive. So that's how it is. And I somewhere had felt like, I remember arguing back with my parents way when I was in my teens, that no, but I feel I belong in a field like F1, nothing less than F1. And at that point, it was a very audacious statement to make to my father, saying, oh, I belong nowhere less than F1. But I was one of those people who loved mouthing off to the men in my family when they gave me a no. And especially if it came from their gender, I used to be like, no, now I want to do it because you've said a no. So that was another instinct in me. I don't know what you can call it. That was one part of my nature that really helped with my career.
That's your racing driver mentality coming.
Because when someone says a no, I feel like
do it
even more. And so those no's somehow were not a serious answer that I really took. I think a lot of my editors must have said it by now, and I mean, a lot of them even see it. But today it's just boomed out of my control also. It's, I don't know how many races I do now. I have no idea how my body travels place to place, and you're seeing it.
Yeah. Thank you for listening to Off Track. If you enjoyed the episode, subscribe here and follow us on Instagram @TheHairpinCo.